Hello, I'm Paul Cox, and I'd like to welcome you to Slooh, where you can join our global community as we learn to explore space together tonight. And tonight, we're celebrating the Supermoon Challenge, where we've been asking you to share your own magical moon moments with us over the last couple of weeks using the hashtag Supermoon Challenge. Now then, before we move to our main part of the show, I want to talk about an elephant that appeared in the room today with a well-known celebrity scientist and one news outlet, mention no names, New York Times, saying that a supermoon is nothing to be excited about. Well, excuse me, celebrity scientist and New York Times, we disagree wholeheartedly. Anything that gets people looking up to the night sky is super in our book. So tonight we're going to cock a snook, right, to the Scrooges and Grinches who want to deny us our little bit of magic and mischief by celebrating this supermoon. And while they're sitting at home, twiddling their thumbs, no doubt, we've come together as a global community to exercise our curiosity and share our sense of wonder at that mighty silver orb gracing our skies tonight. And that's what's super about this supermoon. Now, astrophysicists can continue to call it a perigee syzygy of the Earth, Moon, Sun system. Yeah, you got it. But we're all gonna enjoy our supermoon tonight. So bah humbug to all of the supermoon killjoys out there, right? Now I've got that off my chest, let's get down to enjoying our show tonight. Now, from the beginning of time, humans turn their eyes skyward. They've gathered around fires to share stories of the mythical creatures and characters that they saw in the stars. And it's marked the ebb and flow of the seasons for them while they were doing that. Now, each generation learnt the myth, the legend, and lore of the night sky through those very magical and often heroic stories passed down through the ages. And tonight, we're doing exactly the same. We're gathering from all corners of the globe, and we're carving out a little tranquil sanctuary to explore, learn, and share that same sense of curiosity and awe of the celestial wonders, just as our ancestors did for millennia. So it really doesn't matter what your perspective is. If you wonder what's out there, you've come to the right place to embark on your very own personal adventure of discovery, maybe. It doesn't matter whether it's spiritual, cultural, or scientific. Now then, if you are not already a member, please sign up tonight. Slooh needs your help to support our mission to, it's a pretty ambitious mission actually, to teach the world to explore space in a commercial-free sanctuary, which is Slooh. Now, tonight, we're going to be gazing through the telescope Slooh members control every night at one of the most beautiful sights in the night sky, our moon. And not just any moon. Tonight's full moon is the largest and brightest of 2017. It's the supermoon. Now, don't let anyone tell you. Don't let those doommongers and killjoys tell you that it looks no different. It's 14% larger and 30% brighter than a mini full moon. Now, if you hop over to the discussion boards at Slooh, you'll see one of the beautiful comparison images that we put up of a mini moon and a supermoon. And frankly, you've got to be blind not to spot the difference. Now, throughout the show, we are going to explore what makes a supermoon super, what causes them, the best way to view them from your own backyard. If you haven't seen it already tonight, I'm going to tell you exactly where to look, how to look. And also, if you're interested in capturing the supermoon, we're going to also explain to you how to photograph them. And we'll even be discussing whether they cause earthquakes and affect animal and human behavior. And what else have we got? Oh, we've got the results of our poll, and we'll be sharing your best Supermoon Challenge moments as well throughout the show. Now, if you have any questions for us tonight, hop over to the discussion boards at slooh.com and post them there, and we'll answer as many of those as we can near the end of the show. And don't forget, it's not too late to share your magical and mischievous moon moments for our Supermoon challenge using the hashtag Supermoon challenge. Now, before we do all of that, we're going to start with a bit of storytelling, I think. I'm just going to ask whether or not we've got Helen Avery. I know we've been having trouble getting Slooh's storyteller on tonight, but okay, so we're still having a problem getting her on. So we'll maybe hold fire for a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about what we're looking at on the screen at the moment. Now, we're using we've got great live feeds from both of Slooh's observatories tonight. We timed the show specifically so that we could get both observatories. Now, first off, we got our flagship observatory at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. Those islands, they're home. People don't understand this. They're home to the largest optical telescope in the world. So Slooh's in really good company. And we also have some great close-up views from our Southern Hemisphere Observatory in Chile, and that's hosted by the Pontifical Catholic University down there near Santiago. So we get to see the whole, the gems of the Southern Hemisphere skies. Now, we've been looking at our all-sky camera already from the Canary Islands Observatory, and this one is our Canary 2 ultra wide field. Now, this is the only telescope tonight that's going to give us the view of the whole of the lunar disk, because would you believe that there's about 14% difference in size between a mini moon and a supermoon is enough to actually push the moon, make the moon too big to fit entirely in the stream coming from our Canary 2 wide field telescope. So hopefully the studio are going to be bringing up a few of those at the moment. But if you're on the website looking at watching the show at slooh.com, then you can flick across all of those tabs anyway. Now, what else have we got coming up? We are going to be welcoming a little bit later Helen Avery. She's going to be joining us. She'll pop up on the screen, I expect, as soon as she's here. So I'll stop waffling as soon as that happens. But she is Slooh's stellar storyteller, and she has got some wonderful stories about what inspired the Supermoon challenge and some other stories as well. But I think it's time for me, actually, so I'm just going to hop down, actually, and I'm going to take a look, because we've got some questions here for you, from you. Now then, here's one, actually, that we've had from Maynard Pindray. He's a long-time Slooh member, and he said, why do most astronomers curse a full moon? Well, even if you're a lunatic astronomer who studies the moon, a full moon really isn't the best time to observe it, although the supermoon is absolutely a cracking sight when you see it. But it's blinding. Not literally, but through a telescope, it's so bright. And because it's lit uniformly by sunlight, there are no shadows or contrasts to see any of the features. Lesser moon phases are far, far better and more interesting to observe the actual moon. Now, those astronomers who study the moon are relatively small in proportion, although there's kind of an increasing interest given some of those new space sectors who are trying to set up moon bases and stuff. But most astronomers, professional and amateur, study other celestial objects. Most galaxies, nebulae and comets are faint. That's why they look terrific through Slooh's large telescopes in the Canary Islands. And the problem is that when the sky is like this, we might hop back to our all-sky view. We'll see just how much the sky's lit up. The sky's actually blue tonight because the sky is so bright. Look at it with this moon. That looks like the daytime. It looks like the sun, but it's not. That's the moon high above the observatories at the moment. And what that does when you're trying to capture faint galaxies and nebulae through the Slooh telescopes is it makes the images quite noisy. It's almost like natural light pollution. So that is why most astronomers curse a full moon. But let's talk a little bit about this supermoon. I'm going to wait for Helen to come on until we actually talk about what makes a supermoon super. But for the time being, if you would like to let me just catch up here, because we're having a few technical issues tonight. I'm going to tell you exactly how you can view this tonight. So do excuse us. Actually, before I do that, I've got a great question that came up in the discussions from Ketna C, and this is it. They have posted this beautiful image as well. It says, "Hi, I'm new to astronomy. I live in India, and I was watching the supermoon tonight, and I saw a moonbow surrounding it. Since I live in a city, it doesn't look very bright, but it's still very apparent. It appears like a halo surrounding the moon, and it's beautiful. Also, I noticed the sky inside the halo is darker than that outside it. The sky is clear and it never snows here. Can you explain how it's formed?" I'm just going to ask the studio to switch off the feedback that I've got so I can answer this properly. But what you're seeing there, Ketna, is you're seeing what is called a lunar halo. Now, you get a very similar phenomena with the sun. And it's when there's very high level ice particles very high up in the sky. And they're hexagonals. These ice crystals are hexagonal. And they bend the light like little prisms inside them. And magically, it's what gives us actually this. They're always the same diameter, these halos, either for the sun or for the moon. And they've got a 22-degree radius. So from the moon out to the edge of this halo. So it's a big circle. People can hop over to have a look at Ketna's image in the discussion boards because it's pretty cool. And it's the way the light is refracted which makes it always 22 degrees away from the moon. And if it's bright enough, and this is where actually a supermoon really comes into full effect on this particular phenomena, you can start to see some color in that halo. You know, not as bright like a rainbow, but you can start to see some color. You usually see it a lot more actually with sunlight. But Ketna also mentions that inside that halo, it's darker. And that's also because the light is being refracted from the moon. So it is darker. It's not an optical illusion, Ketna. So anybody going outside to have a look at this supermoon themselves tonight, make sure that if you've got that funny kind of circle around it, what you're seeing there is the moon's light being refracted through these hexagonal ice crystals way up in the atmosphere. So I'm going to move on to how do you see the supermoon tonight? Well, obviously we've got our live scopes. We're going to get up some close-up images of this a little bit. Hey, while we're looking at that particular image, have a look at Slooh's Twitter feed today, because if you haven't heard of Dino Moon, you're going to see it. And I'll tell you, once you've seen this image that's in our Twitter feed, you will never see the moon in the same light again. You will always see a dinosaur, a Tyrannosaurus Rex heading a football. So we've got some great close-up views. I don't know whether this is coming from our Canary 4 or maybe our Chile 2 telescope. So do excuse us, we have got a few technical problems. But how do you at home view this supermoon if you haven't done so already? So it's what time over there? About 9:15 on the east coast of the USA. So in Europe now, the moon is directly overhead. Got some pretty poor weather here in England, so we're not seeing it very well. But on the east coast of the United States, just after sunset, in fact, anywhere in the US, just after sunset, that's when a full moon rises. So the best way of seeing a supermoon is actually when it is just rising, because you get this absolutely staggering effect of this large moon rising in the east just as the sun is setting in the west. And what comes into play here, try and get a really low horizon so that you get the landscape and you can see the moon rising above it, because there's this second phenomena which we don't fully understand. Psychologists don't fully understand this, but it's called the moon effect. And it's when we see the moon, or the sun actually comes to that, when it's low down on the horizon, so in the context of the horizon, it appears a lot bigger. Now, sometimes people put that down to being the supermoon, but we've already said the supermoon really is 14% larger than a mini moon, a mini full moon. So there is an optical and very noticeable difference. So that's all you've got to do. Go out shortly after sunset, look to the east and where the sun rises normally, and you'll see the mighty supermoon rising. Now, you can also photograph it. And if you photograph it, please share your images using the hashtag Supermoon Challenge. Try and get, once again, the best way of photographing the supermoon is not when it's high in the sky. It's best to try and make a landscape shot. Now, if you're using a mobile, oh, this is looking rather nice. That looks like the Chile telescope to me. That's looking pretty cool. That, wow, look at the definition on that image stream. That is absolutely stunning. Now, anybody who says that's not super needs their head examining. Anyway, if you want to photograph the supermoon yourself, try and set up. So once again, you're going to see it with maybe a foreground building or in a landscape. And the moon and sun, people are quite surprised sometimes at just how small they appear in a photo, even using a camera, let alone a cell phone. So make sure that you've got it steady, because obviously it's going to be quite dark by then. You know, dusk is fallen. So prop your phone up, put it on timer release, put it on a tripod if you've got a tripod. Maybe try and, because you've done that, put it on a zoom setting as well. So you zoom in as far as you can. But if you really want to take the most stunning supermoon shots of all, you'll need a DSLR camera. Now, DSLR cameras coming up to Christmas. If you haven't got one, you can pick up a really good second-hand DSLR camera on eBay for a couple of $100, you know, 150 euros, something like that. So there's no excuse why you can't do this kind of nighttime photography. That's what these cameras can do now. But what you want to do is use the largest zoom lens you've got. And you want to be, the best way of doing this would be, say you've got a church, a local church that's off to the east of you. Be a mile away or half a mile from the church on a hill, so you can see that church steeple or whatever it may be, a lovely building or maybe some kind of landscape feature, and zoom in on it. So you'll have to plan this out, right? Because you have to get the alignment right. But you zoom in on that and get the supermoon behind it. When you do that, the whole image kind of concertinas up, and that's what makes some of the supermoon images that aren't faked in Photoshop look absolutely amazing. Now, I'm going to hope to get an update from our studio to see if we got Helen Avery in. Otherwise, we're going to do a little bit of jigging around here, and I'll try and do some of the stuff Helen was doing. Okay, so we have still got a few problems here. So I am going to take over from the first thing that Helen was going to talk to us about. And it was going to really be talking about the inspiration for Slooh's Supermoon Challenge. Now, it's from a story. It's a beautiful little story, and this is what inspired our editor at Slooh, Karen Stevens, and Mike Palucci, for the Supermoon Challenge. And it's a story called Clair de Lune, and it was written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Steven Millhauser. And it's about a 15-year-old boy who can't sleep. And the moon is huge and bright as he's kind of full of restless energy. So he decides to sneak out of his house and wander around outside. Now, he tries to kind of tell himself that he's walking aimlessly in the moonlight, but finally admits that he's heading past the house of a girl he has a crush on. Hey, look at this cool new image coming on. Oh, I like that. Anyway, he tries to tell himself that it's just an accident, that he happens to be passing by this house of the girl he has a crush on. And it reads, it's My idea, bred by the bold moon and the blue summer night, was suddenly clear to me. I had never visited her before, never walked home with her. What I felt was too hidden for that. And the full moon pushes him to act on this desire. And when he passes the back of her house, this is a quote, into the full radiance of the moon, he finds that she's also outside playing a ghostly game of wiffle ball. Now, I have no idea what wiffle ball is in the UK, but I understand it's quite popular in the States. And she's playing wiffle ball under the moonlight with her friends. And the story kind of unspools in an enchanted kind of dreamlike manner as the boys invited into the game, and the boundary between reality and fantasy kind of seemed to melt away. Look at this cracking supermoon image coming in. Now then, I think we're going to read you a longer extract of that, and then after that I'm going to tell you exactly what makes a supermoon super. But forgive me, my dulcet tones are not as dulcet as Helen, but I'm going to read this section to you anyway, and it really is an enchanting story. And we've got a similar story actually by the same author in Slooh's book, which is pretty good. This is an excerpt from the story, so be watching these super images of the supermoon from Slooh's telescopes, and I'll read you this little section. The summer I turned 15, I could no longer fall asleep. I would be motionless on my back, in a perfect imitation of sleep, and imagine myself lying fast asleep with my head turned to one side and a tendon pushed up along the skin of my neck. But even as I watched myself lying there, dead to the world, I could hear the faint burr of my electric clock, a sharp creak in the attic, like a single footstep, a low rumbling hum that I knew was the sound of trucks rolling along the distant throughway. I could feel the collar of my pajama top touching my jaw. Through my trembling eyelids, I sensed that the darkness of the night was not dark enough, and suddenly opening my eyes, as if to catch someone in my room, I'd see the moonlight streaming past the edges of the closed Venetian blinds. My room was filling up with moonlight. The darkness I longed for, the darkness that had once sheltered me, had been pushed into corners where it lay in thick, furry lumps. I felt a heaviness in my chest, an oppression. I wanted to hide in the dark. Desperately, I closed my eyes, imagining the blackness of a winter night, snow-covered the silent streets. On the front porch, the ice chopper stood leaning next to the black mailbox, glinting with icicles. Lines of snow lay along the cross pieces of telephone poles and the tops of metal street signs. And always through my eyelids, I could feel the summer moonlight pushing back the dark. One night, I sat up in bed harshly and threw the covers off. My eyes burned from sleeplessness. I could no longer stand this nightly violation of the dark. I dressed quietly, tensely, since my parents' room stood on the other side of my two bookcases, then made my way along the hall, and out into the living room. At the front door, I hesitated a moment, then stepped out into the warm summer night. The sky surprised me. It was deep blue, the blue of a sorcerer's hat, of night skies in old Technicolor movies, of deep mountain lakes in Swiss countryside pictured on old puzzle boxes. I remembered my father removing from a leather pouch in his camera bag a circle of silver and handing it to me. And when I held it up, I saw through the dark blue glass a dark blue world, the color of the night. Suddenly, I stepped out of the shadow of the house into the whiteness of the moon. The moon was so bright, I couldn't look at it as if it were the night sun. I could smell low tide in the air, and thought of heading for the beach. But I found myself walking the other way, for already I knew where I was going, knew and did not know where I was going, in the sorcerer-blue night where all things were changed. And as I passed the neighbouring ranch houses, I took in the chimney shadows, black and sharp against the roofs, the television antennas standing clean and hard against the blue night sky. Soon, the ranch houses gave way to two small two-story houses. The smell of the tide was gone. The shadows of telephone wires showed clearly on the moon-washed streets. I could not understand why no one was out on a night like this. Was I the only one who'd been drawn out of hiding and heaviness by that summer moon? Oh, I knew where I was going. Didn't want to know where I was going. Now you have to read the entirety of that story. It is absolutely delightful. Now, if the studio can give me a little break, carry on watching the live images, because we're going to regroup a little bit and I'm going to be coming straight back to you to be explaining exactly what it is that makes a supermoon super. So I'll be back in a short break. Don't go anywhere. Yes, are you sure we're not on? Hello and welcome back to Slooh's coverage of the supermoon and the supermoon challenge. You can tell we are suffering tonight. The supermoon, nobody told us that the supermoon has these physical effects on electronic equipment. and specific kind of telephone wires and internet provision. So something's going wrong. So we're kind of struggling a little bit, but we hope you're enjoying some of the live imagery. We're going to try and get to some of your questions, but for now, actually, we are going to talk a little bit later about a big question that a lot of people had today for us, and that is, does the supermoon cause earthquakes or volcanic activity? And I've got some really interesting info to tell you on that one. But for now, it kind of strikes me that we haven't explained what makes a supermoon super, other than a worldwide global audience coming together to gaze at these astonishing live image streams from Slooh's Canary Islands Observatory and our Chile Observatory. So it's pretty cool, isn't it? Pretty cool. But anyway, what else makes it super? It all has to do, with the moon's orbit around Earth. And up until the early 1600s, when Galileo, you've heard of that chap, first pointed a telescope to the moon, it was thought that the heavens and the celestial bodies that it encompassed were perfect, kind of perfect spheres in perfect symmetry, moving in perfect circles. But when Galileo first laid eyes on exactly what we're looking at tonight, this cratered and pitted lunar moonscape, he saw that, as we can see here, it was far from perfect. Now, astronomers had struggled to reconcile what they saw with the perfect Earth-centered universe they believed in. They really struggled to reconcile what they saw in the heavens and that Earth-centered universe. They came up with all manner of fancy tricks to explain the celestial mechanics that they witnessed. And you see some of them, and you got planets going around in tiny little circles within other tiny little circles. I mean, some of the solutions were absolutely beautiful, but how long they were. But it wasn't until a guy called Johannes Kepler, and I think it was in 1609, that we really realized that the orbits of the planets and moon weren't as perfect as they'd previously thought. And his breakthrough was in realizing that these celestial bodies orbited not in perfect circles, but in ellipses. And that is the main factor that generates a supermoon. The moon's elliptical orbit around Earth means that its distance from Earth changes during that orbit. When it's furthest from Earth, it's at what is called apogee. And when it's closest to Earth, it's termed perigee. Now, a good example here. When we started the Supermoon Challenge 2 weeks ago, the moon was furthest from Earth in this particular orbit. It was at 252,000 miles away from Earth. But as it approached its supermoon status tonight, that distance had come down by well over 30,000 miles. So the moon tonight is only 222,000 miles, not 250,000 miles away. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, that makes a supermoon. No, it doesn't. That alone doesn't make a supermoon. That perigee position has to occur around the period of either a full moon or a new moon. Not many people realize that you can also have a new supermoon, which is quite odd. In one definition, it's that this has to take place, the full moon needs to occur when it's within 90% of its closest distance to Earth. And that's what we're celebrating tonight. The full moon is at its closest in its elliptical orbit and looks 14% larger and 30% brighter than a full moon at apogee when it's furthest from the Earth. So don't allow anyone to tell you that the supermoon isn't something worth watching. Anything that gets people, us, together, talking about it, gazing up in awe and wonder at the night sky, has got to be good. So anyway, now then, let me catch up again. We're going to answer some of your questions coming up. I'm still looking at these live images. You can tell we are having a few tech issues tonight, but bear with us. We're blaming it all on the phenomena of the supermoon. It's mucking up the wires somewhere. And in fact, that is probably a good thing for me to talk about next, because we have had some questions about this. I'm just going to pull up the questions. Now, it's quite interesting. A lot of people are really properly concerned about this. We learned this, that people do really truly get concerned by some of the stuff that they see on the internet when we covered the End of the World Live at Slooh in 2012, if you remember that. Hey, listen, we're still here. But anyway, a couple of questions that came in on the Slooh discussion boards. One is from Wayne C. And he says, could the supermoon have any influence on the Barley volcanic activity? And Stephen A. had a similar question. Has there ever been a scientific study done that you know of that shows a natural disaster being triggered by a supermoon? It seems to me that it could be possible. I recall hearing that ocean tides from supermoons can cause great havoc. Well, I've heard an awful lot I actually asked a lot of people during the week, and I said, do you think that the supermoon, when it's closest to Earth, we know that it generates larger tides, spring tides, could they generate earthquakes? And everybody said that innately they felt as if the answer must be yes. But you can't just do a survey like that, can you? You've got to have a scientific study. And there was a scientific study done only last year. In fact, it was in September 2016 by a Japanese group. And they suggested, they basically tracked every single earthquake that had occurred over the last 100 years or so and matched it against the lunar phase and specifically how close the moon was to Earth. And what they found is they couldn't find any correlation between supermoons or these close by moons and the number of earthquakes during those new or full moons. But what they did find was a pattern that suggested that the intensity of earthquakes increased for those earthquakes that occurred during new and full moons. So the problem is, that the change in distance is not that great. And gravity is a fairly weak force. We know that. For goodness sake, the moon, and don't forget, the Earth's moon is the largest moon in proportion to a planet of any other moons in the solar system. So it's pretty goddamn big. So you'd think that it would have this great big impact, and it doesn't. You can see that the moon being so close, the tides in the oceans, it only can pull the water up by about 4 feet, 1 meter. But did you know this? That those are ocean tides, but did you know that there are also earth tides? So this is the actual Earth, the actual mantle of the Earth is also being affected by the moon's orbit around Earth. But it only moves it by 1 centimeter. That's the size of your thumbnail. It's a half an inch, something like that. And it's that is really what sparked people to think that earthquakes can be caused by this. But you can see there's a tiny, tiny movement there. And frankly, there are a lot of other forces in volcanic activity and plate tectonics in the Earth that are usually responsible for earthquakes. It overwhelms the effect of this. But that Japanese study in 2016 did suggest that if there is an earthquake during a close moon like that, like tonight's one, then the intensity is usually changed. Now, I'm just going to take a little look at something else. Do excuse me for 1 second. We are going to take a very short break, and I'm going to be right back because I think we've got some other pretty cool stories to tell. So don't go back. Don't go away. We'll be right back. And then we'll. So we are back here at Slooh. And who knew that a supermoon could affect Skype so badly? I am delighted to welcome, and it gets me out of a rather large pickle, as you may have seen this evening. I'm delighted to welcome Slooh storyteller Helen Avery to the show. Hello, Helen.
Hello, Paul. I think you've been really a champ. Like to hold on for this long, I can't believe it. I'm so yeah. Well, that's full moon for you.
Well, I feel sorry for our viewers because I'm sure they would have preferred to listen to your dulcet tones. And although it kind of sounds like the Brits are taking over the farm tonight, you're actually on the east coast of America, in New York, I think. I'm over here in England, and of course the show is coming from our studio. Where actually, I think they had a big bonfire party outside Slooh HQ and the studio, and I'm not sure if that hasn't kind of. I am assured that there was no alcohol involved in our technical difficulties at all tonight. But anyway, back to Helen, our Supermoon challenge. Now, I spoke a little bit about what inspired it, and we've heard a little extract from the story, but you've been involved with it from other perspectives as well. So tell us a little bit more about what inspired Slooh's Supermoon Challenge.
Yeah, I mean, so we love a good moon at Slooh. And I think we're all in agreement, we're all hooked on astronomy for different reasons. I really love all the story about, different how our ancestors throughout history looked at the night sky. Some of us really love the factual stuff and the science and wow, how big is this stuff and how far is it away? But we all sort of agree that we all kind of got that hook only when we went out, we happened to be out under the sky experiencing it. So as much as we love people to come on to Slooh and read our posts and look through their telescopes and listen to these shows, what we really want to do is get people out there so they can have that experience, because once that experience is formed, that's your connection done. Like you're done, you're sold, you're forever. And once you've seen a full moon and really sort of experienced it, it's just always in your awareness and consciousness then. So we really wanted to get people out. And as you've talked about tonight, this was a super moon. So it was a really sort of good excuse. And also, we've got the brightest night in the month with the shortest, darkest day. So it's a real sort of lovely contrast. So that's what we kind of want to do. So we said to people, get out there, inspired by the story that you read, go out, recite poetry, play your own baseball game, have a ritual, have a bonfire, gather your friends, have a few drinks or not, or whatever, have a salt bath, sea salt bath. That's what I do. Something that you can just honor this moon and really, just take a look at it. So, and I know that people have, Barbara Scheck says she went out on a hike to the top of a high ridge to watch the sunset and the supermoon rise.
Oh, excellent! Because I was explaining there, Helen. And if the sun hasn't set wherever you are at the moment, and you can do this tomorrow night as well, because the moon's still going to be, pretty damn close to full, and it's still going to look pretty big. If you can get high up somewhere where you have that clear western horizon to see the sun set, and at the same time look east and see the full moon rise. We do it at the Canary Islands Observatory. I always make a point of it, Helen, when I'm there. It's a big volcano, and you stand on the ridge, and the mountain, 8,000 feet, it just looks like it cascades down straight to the sea, straight to the Atlantic Ocean. And you have such a clear horizon, you can actually see below 0 degrees to the west and below 0 degrees to the east. And if you can experience that sun setting and the moon rise, I mean, that must have driven a lot of ritual, I would have thought, for a lot of people, as well as it being just a great thing to see at the moment.
Well, it sounds like it's your ritual.
Yeah, it is. Actually, yeah, I hadn't actually thought about it, but it is something that I specifically do when I go there. I hadn't thought about it in those terms.
Look at you. You're a mystic. You've got your own rituals going. I don't know. You'll be wearing feathers next and covering yourself in sage.
Oh, no, I do that already. Just not on air. So, but anyway, what other inspirations or what other rituals have taken place? I know you've got a couple of stories that you're going to tell us, and I think there's a couple of folk stories as well. So really, Helen, I'm in your hands to tell us a little bit more about this kind of softer side of the supermoon and the lore and legend. Oh, by the way, if anybody's new to Slooh and they haven't caught Helen's new series of shows on constellations, you need to watch them. We'll tell you all about when they're going to be at the end of the show, but learning the constellations, Helen, is, and I said at the outset of the show, our ancestors have learned the night sky by those stories of these mythical creatures and characters. But anyway, sorry, I digressed a little. You've got some pretty cool stuff, I think, to tell us tonight.
Yeah, but I just want to talk briefly on your point. So about the moon and like our ancestors, we talk about constellations and the stories from the past. People have been tracking the moon for, probably for as long as it's been humans. We've been sort of observant of the moon. But the Lascaux cave paintings, which I talk about all the time in the constellation stories, the phases of the moons are on those cave painting walls, and that's, they think about 20,000 years old. And then in Ireland, I'm going to pronounce it wrong.
Don't worry.
But anyway, somewhere in Ireland, I'll come back to it. Naut, I pronounce it, but I think it's Naut. There's like a Neolithic burial site, and they've got paintings there that people believe it's actually paintings of the face of the moon, and that's about 5,000 years old. So people have been observing the dark spots on the moon and then recreating them for a really long time. So, as you sort of mentioned, this sort of connection to our ancestors in this way we've always looked up as not just constellations, but obviously the moon as well. Yeah. But yes, I wanted to talk to you, talk a little bit about some of the other rituals that happen on full moon. So, all around the world, I have friends right now doing rituals. I did my own ritual out in my garden earlier on. But it's thought that the full moon has this sort of healing power. And that's for many different reasons. And that's probably come from, sort of ancient man, of gods and goddesses of the moon, and the moon being a sort of symbol of fertility, because the moon marked the seasons. The sun sort of marked the time of the day and the year, or sort of this period. But the moon really was, this marker of the seasons, and so it was sort of connected to fertility and water, because people observed very early on actually the connection with tides. So it was thought, and people didn't know the Earth revolved around the sun. They thought these two entities were dictating everything on Earth, the sun and the moon. Okay. So it sort of made sense that on a full moon, when it was, the most light was coming from the moon, that people would go to the moon and ask for things, give their gratitude to the moon. So this is a recent one. So I just want people to realize, people are still using the healing powers of the moon up until recently, and still are doing it. So in Northern Ireland in the 1930s, the older inhabitants living around the lake of Lough Gur, they shared this tale about what they had heard happen on a full moon, and that it was believed to heal the sick. So on the night of the full moon, the people brought their sick close to the lake so that the moonlight shone brightly on them, and the people called that night All Heal. Every full moon was called an All Heal night which is interesting, right? And if a sick person wasn't better by the 8th or 9th day of the moon, then basically they would hear the sun singing to comfort them dying. So the shot there, get to the lake if you're sick. Otherwise, by day 9, it's game over. Then other stories from around the world. We got in India, ritual of putting water out to get the sort of reflection of the moon on a full moon, and then you drink the water for healing. That happens in a lot of shaman ceremonies. That's something I include in my full moon rituals. In China, putting food out, again, similar thing. It's sort of imbibing the moon's rays and then eating that for prosperity. People put crystals out to activate crystals from the healing power of the moon. Fire ceremonies, so what's happening at HQ tonight, but also Joe Moore on Twitter, he tweeted a picture of the bonfire he's having tonight. This fire ceremony that tends to happen on a full moon. The full moon is seen as a period of like the culmination of the pure potential in each of us. And then as it begins to wane, it's like a release. So typically a fire ceremony, which happens sort of in a lot of indigenous cultures, like Native American culture, in South America and also in Australia and South Pacific, you light a fire and everything you want to release, you write down, you put it in the fire. And it's thought that the moon will take that all, and over the next 14 odd days, it will just leave. So then when it comes to a new moon, you'll be sort of back to pure potential and ready to sort of sow seeds, as it were.
It's fascinating how so many of these things seem to be very similar, but have evolved in totally different geographical locations, quite separately.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's only so many things you can do with a ritual when you're back in the day. You've got fire, you've got water, so you're going to do something with fire and water and a moon. And even today, I mean, nothing's really advanced from there. Everybody I know who does a full moon ritual, and for all different, whether they're Buddhist or Hindu or a New Age or pagan or Druid, they do a fire ceremony. They'll put out water. They'll write something down and offer it to the moon. Gratitude is a big one that comes in with the full moon. There's a really lovely story in India that the creator only created the sun, and he came down to earth and saw everyone was working really hard and slaving away, and he said to them, "Oh, how long have you been working?" And they said, "Well, we started today." And he was like, "Oh, we started today, okay." And then he sees the children working and he says, "But how old are these children? When were they born?" And they're like, "Well, today." And he realizes, oh, because there's only the sun, there's only today. These poor people are never getting a rest. So he then goes away and says, "I'll create nighttime." And the people are like, "Yeah, we quite like it. We like having the rest. It's really great. But the problem is we're getting up at night and we're bumping into things and tripping over and we're hurting ourselves." And he's like, "Oh, I know. I'll create something called the moon." And so he created this very gentle light that helps people sleep still and rest, but it can stop them bumping into each other. And so there's this sort of story with this great gratitude, because without the moon, we wouldn't have any rest at all.
I mean, and kind of I'm interested in doing a lot of astronomy, as you know. It kind of comes with the job, but so I'm normally working at night, so it was kind of the opposite for me. I could kind of do without the sun altogether, really. But you were mentioning there, one of the rituals is looking at the reflection of the moonlight in some water that's put out. And I shared on Twitter earlier on Slooh's Twitter feed one of my favorite pieces of art ever, and it's kind of because it's a style that I like, but it's also because of what it is. And it's by Johann Christian Dahl, and it's called "The View of Dresden by Moonlight." And you've reminded me of it because the way he captures this full moon moonlight reflecting on the river running through the city, it's just breathtaking. And to me, I only reminded myself about it today, and to me it kind of embodies what inspires us and has inspired us for millennia, whenever we look up at that giant silver orb in the sky. And it doesn't matter whether you're an artist who it inspires to do some work, or a spiritualist who is inspired to perform some kind of ritual, or whether or not you're a scientist and you're inspired to study this enormous chunk of rock, orbiting the planet. It is an extraordinary object. And when you think about it, although we know the sun is there, we can't look at it in the same way. We can't really take it in the same way visually that we can take the moon in. So, Helen, what else have we got? We've got we need to catch up with a couple of questions. I don't know if we've got any of those that we can have a quick look at. Let's take a look through. Do feel free to jump in with any of your other stories if you like.
Well, we ran a poll.
Oh, yes. Now, so listen, can we start then on that and talk about animal behavior before we talk about the poll?
Absolutely.
Because this year I witnessed, so this is about how full moons and the moon affects nature and wildlife. And earlier this year, I witnessed this kind of great and kind of cliched example that I had previously thought was a total myth. And it was during our transcontinental road trip for the eclipse in August. And myself and Mike Palucci, we were on this road trip, and we stopped off at some absolutely stunning campsites in the Slooh mobile observatory. And we were there one night, and it just happened to be a night for meteor watching. And we actually saw quite a few meteors, but early on in the evening. But then the full moon started to rise. And as you know, I live in England. This is not something that I'm usually here very much. But the wolves, the local wolves, started howling just as the moon became visible over the horizon. And when it had breached the horizon, they stopped. Now, I don't know if that was a total and utter coincidence, but it seemed fairly convincing to me. But you also know, don't you, some stuff about turtles and full moons and how they're affected?
Yeah, I mean, turtles come onto the beach and lay their eggs on a full moon. Coral is said to activate more. It's very interesting that marine life. Well, it sort of makes more sense, doesn't it? Marine life would, because of the tidal pull, perhaps, be activated more on a full moon. So they're the animals I know, and then there's reports. Like there's this great one about how the number of emergency room people who come into emergency room suffering from animal bites doubles on a full moon, or so maybe so there's obviously something in animals. And when I'm a dog owner, and so I'm always aware that my dog always seems a bit out of sorts on a full moon, but maybe
really I haven't noticed that in my dog. But there was one really heartbreaking thing that I heard about only a couple of months ago, and it has to do with the turtles hatching. And it's something that also affects us astronomers, and it's light pollution. And what we saw on this documentary was a particular species of turtle, and it has their hatchlings hatch at a full moon, and they follow the silver orb to the sea. It's what takes them there. But in several of these locations, close by city lights, are so bright that they've confused these poor little blighters, and the hatchlings have headed towards the city lights rather than the protective ocean. And there was this devastating, heartbreaking scene of a highway just spattered with these poor things. And in fact, there's a whole group of people there now who are going there and just scooping these turtles up at a full moon and putting them back into the ocean. But who'd have thought that light pollution was so bad that animals confuse it to this enormous bright object in the sky. But so, Helen, on a cheerier note, well, maybe it's not a cheerier note.
I don't know if it is.
Does the full moon and moonlight affect humans in any way? And did a little poll in our Facebook wall.
So, the verdict is still out. And so I am grateful that the verdict is still out. So people will point to research that shows nothing happens, that, emergency room visits don't go up, and that there aren't more babies born on full moons, because that's another one people like to say, and they'll say that crime doesn't go up. But for every one of those studies that says that, there's a study that shows it does. So I thought, and what was interesting was we polled, it was only a small poll on Twitter, to ask people if they had no effect at all, they had physical, mental, or emotional effects. And 50%, 52% said no effects, and 48% said either physical, emotional, or mental. So it's, it is like a 50-50.
Wow.
And so here's a couple of the things that I wanted to share from some research. So there was, from our neck of the woods actually, in 2007, Sussex Police in England, it's a county in England, they carried out research and showed there was a correlation between violent incidents and full moons. Although interestingly, paydays and violent incidents also had a correlation. So there was a comment about maybe full moons people are just out drinking, and on paydays people are out drinking, and maybe it's more about the drink than it is, who knows. But and it made me laugh because it appeared in an article in the Guardian newspaper, and they interviewed a security, like, I don't know what you call them over here, but a bouncer. So it's like a security guard on a bar security. Brighton bouncer Terry Wing agreed with the theory and said it's so true. When there's a full moon out, we look at the sky and say, oh no, all the idiots are going to be out tonight, which made me laugh. So, I mean, and there's a lot of this anecdotal evidence. I spoke to some friends who work in a dementia unit, and they said there's more confusion around a full moon that they notice. And a couple of people, vets, say they notice a few more incidents. But other studies, University of Basel, in Switzerland, showed that melatonin actually reduces during a full moon, so our sleep is a little less smooth.
Just like our story, Clair de Lune. I mean, that's exactly what he's complaining about. He doesn't know why he can't sleep, and then suddenly he realizes that his room is brighter than it should be. Yeah.
Right. And on a plus side, an Indian study found hearts work more efficiently. Kidney stones, unfortunately, increase during a full moon, and epileptic seizures decrease during a full moon. I was surprised at that. I thought that might be the way around. And then there are, a few gruesome stories of different murders that tended to happen on full moons. But I mean, murders sadly happen often, and not just on full moons. But so, as I say, is there something in? I don't know. I mean, people believed it. There was a lunacy act in 1842 in Britain, so you could get off crimes and just claim you were moon mad. And even in 1940, as recent as that, a soldier got off for murder and claimed moon madness.
Is this still valid, this act? Is this something I can put to good advantage?
No, you cannot go and murder anyone this evening.
Well, I wasn't thinking anything quite that extreme, but just a little bit of naughtiness and mischief. Yeah, it was the moon what done it, governor.
But the poll, the majority, I think it was like 60% of the people who said that they were impacted, they did feel an impact with the full moon, said it was an emotional impact. Because you think, sometimes it's the restlessness, you can be a bit confused, or you might be tired or something like that on a full moon. But most people said they do notice their emotions are a bit frayed around a full moon.
Right. Okay. How about biologically? Because I know that Bob Berman, he's often talked. Is the menstrual cycle linked with lunar phase? Is that an old wives' tale, or is that something true in there?
I mean, it's linked to. I mean, it's 28-day cycle, and the moon is sort of 29 days. So that the moon is seen as like has a connection with the woman, And also that's what's given it, because people obviously observe that connection way back, that that the moon was sort of given this role of being a god or goddess of fertility and of life and death, actually.
And female as well. I mean, the moon as an object in those stories is female, isn't it?
You know, it is, but that's actually more recent.
Is it?
Back in Babylonian, Mesopotamian, it was a moon god, actually. And the goddess sort of came in with the ancient Greeks. And mostly, well, actually, I can't even say mostly. It's a goddess. In India, it's Chandra is a male. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix. But we tend to think of it like the Native Americans. Native American peoples call the moon Grandmother Moon. She's like an elder moon, and it's seen as the time the full moon women come together and sit with each other and do sort of ceremony and water ceremony and ask for blessings for fertility. And so but women don't fall obviously in all of the same cycle. We're not all ovulating on a full moon, and
yeah.
Thank God. Imagine half the world's population is having babies all at the same time. So there's not that connection. But people do say, if you're looking to have a baby, you kind of want to be ovulating around a full moon, or some say 5 days after. So there is still this belief that we are affected as women by the moon. I feel it personally.
Helen, that's fascinating. Have you got any last story that you could give us before we wrap the show? I think you had did you have one from the Philippines, some folklore? Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you got to talk about tides, but obviously the full moon impacts the tides and people. Well, the moon impacts the tides. So here we go. Yep. Long ago, only gods lived in the world. The earth, the seas, and the sky were ruled by 3 different powerful gods. The sun god who ruled the sky had a very beautiful daughter, Luna the moon, and Luna enjoyed going around the heavens in her golden chariot. One day she found herself taking another path which led her outside her kingdom. She wandered on until she reached the place where the sky met the sea. Beautiful and unusual sights greeted her. As she was admiring the beautiful things, a voice startled her. It said, "Where have you come from, beautiful one?" And turning around, she saw a young man who looked a little like her father, but much younger and fairer. And she wanted to run away, but when she looked at him again, she saw he was smiling. And so, taking courage, she answered, "I am Luna, daughter of the sun god." And the young man smiled back and answered, "I am Ma, the son of the sea god. Welcome to our kingdom." Soon the two became good friends, and they had many interesting stories to tell each other. When it was time for Luna to go, they promised to see each other as often as they could, because they had many more tales to tell, and continued meeting at the same spot where the sea met the sky, until they realized they were in love with each other. One day, after one of their secret meetings, Luna went back to the heavens full of joy. She was so happy that she told this secret to her cousin, but the cousin was very jealous of Luna's beauty and happiness, so reported the affair to the sun god, the father, who was very angry with his daughter for being disobedient. So he shut her away and didn't allow her to get out, and sent a messenger to the sea god telling him that his son Ma had disobeyed immortal laws, and the sea god, who was angered by his own son's disobedience, imprisoned Ma in a sea cave. So Luna stays in the garden for a long time. She's very sad at not being able to see Ma, and she longs to be with him. And one day, feeling very restless, like the moon gets you, she escapes from the garden and takes this golden chariot as a full moon and rushes to their meeting place. And Ma, who is imprisoned in the sea cave, sees her reflection on the water and wants to go out and meet her. And he tries to get out of his cave and causes this unrest in the sea as he's wrestling to get out. And Luna waits for Ma, but he never comes. So back home she goes, very sad. But every time she remembers Ma, she comes out as a full moon of her garden with this sort of restlessness and goes to the place where the sea meets the sky to wait for him. And so it's said that the fishermen out in the sea in the Philippines believe that every time Luna, the full moon, appears, the sea gets troubled. And it is Ma trying to escape from his cave, they say.
I love these songs. They're enchanting, aren't they? But you know, we'll be wrapping up the show soon. But Helen, it kind of reminds me that you're going to be on air, I think, next Sunday. This kind of storytelling to learn the sky, and you've got these shows coming up that really help that, haven't you? What are you doing next Sunday?
Oh, we've got Gemini.
Gemini. So this is it's part of your constellation story series, and you're going to be doing a different constellation every Sunday. So Gemini, why are we doing Gemini? The celestial twins at the moment.
So we're doing ones that we can actually see, because, as we mentioned at the beginning, just like Supermoon Challenge, we want people to go out and experience it. So we're only picking constellations that, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere at least, you can get out and you can have a look at.
Early in the evening as well. Yeah.
So, Gemini, we were talking about Castor and Pollux, these twins who, really have so many stories about them that are in our culture today, but we don't even realise. So we're talking about that. And then the following week we're doing, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Paul, Auriga.
Auriga, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
We don't stand on ceremony here. You pronounce it anyway. We do have the benefit that if Americans are listening to us, we can say, no, that's how we say it in the UK.
Oh, that's true.
But if you're American, you can say that to other. No, well, that's how we say it over here. So you can always get away with that. So you've got Auriga the following week, but also the other reason why we're doing doing Gemini next week is we got the Geminids, haven't we? And that is the best meteor shower of the year, and the moon's going to cooperate because, like we were saying tonight, most astronomers curse the full moon because it makes the sky so bright with natural light pollution you can't see anything else. And during a meteor shower, if you have a full moon, there's just no point in watching. But there is virtually no moon for the Geminids, and that's going to be on the 14th of December. So that's going to be an interesting tie-up to that, Helen, I think. Hearing about the story of Gemini, celestial twins, and then we're going to be looking at watching the Geminis, the best meteor shower of the year. It's always the one I look forward to. So we've got that. And haven't you also got something planned for, you said earlier on, this is kind of shortest day at the moment, longest night, but it's being lit by this brilliant orb tonight. Haven't you got a show on the 21st of December as well?
Yeah, we'll be talking about the winter solstice and all those juicy stories that come with that. And there's a ton of juicy stories with the winter solstice. It was seen as much more important than the summer solstice, actually.
Really? That surprises.
Yeah, it was,
Go on, give us a little bit of a teaser. Why is that then?
Well, just because it was seen as like the end, and the sort of time to put everything to bed, where the world was dying. So it really had a lot of ritual because you kind of didn't want the world to die. So people came out and they had a big fanfare and really trying to G up everything. So it wasn't so the sun would come back. They were terrified with the summer solstice. It was like, oh, it's a long day, that's nice, it's a bit hot, but never mind. But the winter solstice really brought everyone out in a panic. So yeah, we'll be talking about
I might take a trip down. I'm not sure if I'm on that particular live cast on that night, but if not, I fancy taking a trip down. I live fairly close to Stonehenge, but the place I've never been to are the Avery stones, and they're kind of a little bit more interesting to me. But I might take a little bit of a trip down there, and if I can get any kind of signal, then I can give you a live report. I'm not sure that the other people celebrating solstice at Avery Stones would particularly appreciate this guy talking on his mobile phone, giving a live interview in the middle of this very spiritual, situation there. But so we've got lots to look forward to for you, but we've also got a whole stack of other series as well, starting at the moment. So Dr. Paige Godfrey, she is doing the second episode of her Intro to Astronomy course. So if you're interested in learning about space, that is the place to start off. So that's going to be the second one. That's on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be starting at some point this week. We've got to time it to when the observatory is open. My practical astronomy course. And the first part of that is really going to be focusing on how to use Slooh to explore and learn about the night sky. So viewers can keep an eye on the website for when we announce that. what else have we got? Well, yeah, we've got the Geminids coming up as well, which is going to be an absolutely brilliant show. That's titled All That Glitters. That's going to be a good one. I think we're going to do this particular meteor shower in a slightly different way. But one thing is guaranteed: if there's a meteor shower during the year where you're going to see some pretty cool meteors, it's the Geminids. So, anyway, and Helen, I don't know if you know this, but our eclipse writing contest is coming to an end, but people have still got till the end of the month to submit their short story, which is all about, it's about them capturing what they saw or felt or witnessed for the solar eclipse in the USA. So, Helen, have you got anything to tell viewers before we close down the show?
I don't think so. I'm just no. I mean, I'm excited about all the things that are happening, and I'm excited about your series and Dr. Page's series because it's really helpful to me because I come at such a different angle that I need lots of.
But this is really weird because I am really looking forward, and I already enjoyed the first one. I'm really looking forward to yours, and in fact, your series about constellation stories actually prompted me to get some new books about constellation myths and stuff like that, because it really does, and we've talked about this. It's such a brilliant way of learning the night sky. I mean, for goodness sake, that's what people have been using those very stories for millennia. And storytelling is one of the best ways of absorbing and learning that kind of thing. It's very easy to, remember a story, but really, if you were just told those were all the stars in that area of the sky, could you remember that? Oh, I know I certainly couldn't, but probably got early onset, something or other.
It's true. I was flying into Memphis this week, and I looked out the window and I could see 3 stars, and I was like, that's Orion's belt. That's Orion's belt. And I know that if I follow that up, then I get to Aldebaran, and then I get to the Pleiades. And it was really great because I remembered only from their stories. So it's exciting. But then I love hearing all the science as well, because then that goes in at another level, and then you remember it then. So it's.
I find that the constellation stories give me a framework to remember everything else in that area of the sky. So, for example, like we were talking about the other day, in Gemini, we actually know that it's quite bereft of interesting deep sky objects, galaxies and star clusters and nebulae and stuff like that. There are a couple of my favorites, actually. The Eskimo Nebula is one of my favorites. So I know you're going to be scheduling that hopefully during the show. But anyway, to everybody who's watching tonight, I apologize. We've had a few little technical issues. We put it all down to the gravitational force of the supermoon. But if you've enjoyed our show tonight, then please consider joining Slooh as an apprentice or an astronomer member, where you can learn to explore space by following all of those new courses. And as an extra benefit, you get to control the very telescopes that we've been watching tonight. We haven't spoken about them as much as we had hoped, but we've had some absolutely lovely, beautiful live streams coming in from the telescopes that you can control if you join Slooh. And also, this Christmas Day is Slooh's anniversary, and your membership is a kind of affirmation of that 14-year mission to teach the world to explore space. So please join tonight and become part of the Slooh community who explore and learn about space together every night. So thank you for joining us tonight. Now, anybody who hasn't already done so, go outside and capture your own little magical moon moment and see the largest supermoon of 2017. What do you think to that, Helen? Have you been outside yet?
Oh my God. I went outside to do my little ritual. Thought, I've got 10 minutes. I better run out there and do it. And there was the moon. And the minute I finished the ritual, I just got my binoculars. I'm like, Bill, come and have a look at this moon. It's amazing. The clouds came over. I was so lucky to have seen it because it is beautiful. And I'm so... I just want to thank everyone who took part in the Supermoon Challenge, because it was really inspiring to see people share their stories of what they were going to do and what they're doing tonight. And, that encouraged me, and it encouraged my conversation with my friends. So, it really helps people just get out, get away from the computer and get out there.
We are still going to be tracking that hashtag Supermoon Challenge all week. you know, in the build up to the Geminids, we're still going to be talking about Supermoon Challenge because, you know, if you have missed it tonight, go out tomorrow night. It's nearly as good. All right, it's barely unnoticeable the difference between one night and the other. It will just rise slightly later than it did tonight. So probably about half an hour, 20 minutes after the sun has set. Look to the east and capture.
And, you know, in terms of ritual, the 3 days after the full moon, you're still in the power of the full moon. So if you didn't get a ritual tonight, pop out tomorrow, write your little note, put it under a rock, light a candle. Say hello to the Mother Moon, Father Moon, Brother Moon.
That's great. And make sure also you check out. I'm just looking at this large live stream coming in. This is the Canary Islands once again. It's Canary Islands Ultra Wide Field Telescope. And make sure you check out that post on Twitter of the Dino Moon. I tell you, you will never ever see the moon in any other way than this Tyrannosaurus Rex heading a soccer ball. So on that note, Helen, I think we'll say goodnight. So thank you so much. You finally managed to get to join me. Thank you very much. You bailed me out a little bit there. So good night, everybody out there, and happy moon watching to you all.
Good night.
Good night.